Welcome back. This is DSR. I am Bruce, where we optimize for fun. And we're talking about party roles. And just as a quick reminder, the goal of this is not some kind of theory crafting optimization for mechanics and damage output. That's not what I do here. What I do here is I try to make the game more accessible for more players, make it easier to use, make it easier to build characters, whether it's you're a new player, whether you're a role play forward player, which I love, those kind of players, right? Where you love the role play and the fantasy, you're just not excited about reading all these mechanics and rules, okay? Which is nothing wrong with that. That's great. Or perhaps you're an experienced player, but you're trying out a new role for the first time or a new class for the first time, and you're wondering what kind of roles you should lean into with that class. That's what we're doing here. These are the 10 party roles. And keep in mind that a role is about what you are contributing to the party. It is not about how you do that. Why is it important to talk about these? You should talk about it with your party, the rest of the players in the group, before you finalize your characters, so that you all have a good idea of what everyone is bringing to the party and how these are all going to work together. And also, none of these are required, right? You don't have to have any of these. There is no mechanical ideal composition for party. The most important part is just that you talk about it as a group so that everybody's on the same page about how this is all going to work together. Here we have the breakdown of every class against every role. And as a reminder, this is tier 1 of play. So you are just level 4. And also, this is just your base class. So no subclass, no background, no species, no feats. And this is version 6 of this table. If you're following along by downloading the table in the Google Drive that I have linked, this is version 6. So we're going to focus on the Frontliner here. That's what this video is about. And you can see that some of these classes are much better at the Frontliner role than others. This is by, again, the class by default. You could certainly raise a class's ability to be a Frontliner by choosing different subclasses, different backgrounds, species, and feats. This is just a comparison between the classes, and it's relative, right? So as you move into higher tiers, the expectation or the bar for being a good Frontliner raises. So if you don't raise at the same level, you'll fall behind and your rating will go lower. And finally, I'm breaking this up into 3 parts in order to make it a little more digestible and not as long. So first part will be about defining the Frontliner role. The second part will be some builds, and how to build a Frontliner. And the third part will be some number crunching and how to calculate some of the things, some of the metrics I'm going to refer to in this video. How does the Frontliner relate to the rest of the party? Well, first of all, there are the 4 usually martial roles, not always, and they are the ranged attacker, the skirmisher, the Frontliner, and the tank. The skirmisher, Frontliner, and tank are all 3 melee roles. And if you think about that spectrum of the melee roles, skirmisher is the highest damage, lowest defense. Tank is the lowest defense, highest damage. And the Frontliner is a balance of both. Let's define the Frontliner. First, you need to be on the front line. That means get into melee as soon as possible and be a threat to keep enemies from the back line, from your backline allies. Second, you need to deal decent damage, or you're not going to be a good Frontliner. They'll just ignore you. You're not going to help kill the enemies. And the longer the enemies stay alive, the more damage you'll take. And then the last factor is you need to survive. So you need enough defenses that you can take a few hits, and you're not going to fold in just 1 or 2 hits. You don't need to survive focus fire. You're not supposed to be the solo person on the front line. Let's dive into these. So being on the front line. This is all about positioning and being at the right place at the right time to protect the back line. So first off, a good initiative modifier. You need to beat the enemies if you want to have a better chance of being in the right position at the right time. If they go first, there's a good chance they could attack your back line or run up to your back line, and now you're not keeping them away from the back line at all. Second, a good movement speed. This one's very relative. A lot of the times 30 feet is just fine. That'll work for a lot of maps. But there will definitely be times when it's not enough. Either you have to climb something or perhaps swim through something. So a climb speed, a swim speed can help. A fly speed definitely helps, or teleportation is the best. So if you have some sort of bonus action teleport you can use once in a while, just when you need to get into position, that helps. Third is reach. This specifically applies to melee attacks and being able to attack from more than 1 square away. So if you can only attack the adjacent square, then you don't have reach. If you can attack more than 1 square away, then you have reach with your melee weapon. Other forms of attacking from a long distance away is called range. So you have a ranged attack, and that's a different category. We'll cover that when we talk about being a ranged attacker. And the final thing here is positioning, knowing where to position, when to position, why to position yourself in these certain ways in order to maximize your ability to be the Frontliner, right? All right, let's get specific with positioning. So this is a map from the Dungeon Master's Guide 2024. It's a sample map. It's not used in any adventure, so the spoilers here should be minimal. But this is actually pretty representative, pretty common type of structure you'll see on maps. It's not very often that maps are just wide open. First up, you see that you have two frontliners, a blaster and a healer in this party of four, and you're up against four ghasts and a ghast gravecaller. Now, the four ghasts only have melee attacks. The ghast gravecaller has a ranged attack and a melee attack. And so, what is the job of the frontliner here? Well, obviously, run up to the front line so that these guys can't get past you and attack your blaster or your healer. If their job is healing, you want to make sure that they can do their job and focus on their job and not worry about being attacked. That's your job, right? So you'll run up to the front line. Now, I recommend that if you're going to play with like frontliners and have the strategy of having people on the front line keeping the enemies away from the back line, probably half the party should be some form of frontliner, right? Either a tank or a frontliner. Those are kind of really the two categories. If less than half the party is a frontliner, you're going to start having a lot of problems with enemies getting around you and still reaching the back line. You don't have to play that way. That's just something you should talk about and think about when you are planning your characters in session 0. So, and if you have a way to address all that, great. Just make sure that everybody's talked about it and everyone's on the same page. All right, let's continue. So the other frontliner would move there, and what this is going to do is mean that these two can't move past you without being attacked with an attack of opportunity by you. Same with these. Now these ones could move this far without provoking an opportunity attack. So if your blaster is actually and your healer are actually right here when you start, then that's not far enough, right? Let's say that this is the starting positions of everybody. And then again, you can see why initiative would be so important. If you don't go first, these monsters could all just be running right up here. And in fact, these guys can move to there. And now your backliners are threatened, right? And they can move there without even provoking an opportunity attack from you. And you can see this configuration is going to give your backliners the best chance of avoiding being targeted, right? The gas can't move past you without provoking an opportunity attack. Now, this is why it's important for you to have a good amount of damage. If your opportunity attack is going to do 2 damage or 3 damage or something like that, then they may not care. Now, they won't know that until they provoke it the first time, but they might be able to observe that you're using a small weapon, you're a dual wielder or something like that, and it is not a big, scary weapon. That would come into play. So if they don't think you're going to do a lot of damage, they might not care that you're going to make an opportunity attack. They might still run to the back line and attack your backliners. The other thing here is this Gravecaller, right? He's making ranged attacks, and those ranged attacks, he could still target your backline, but the rules on cover is that any creature that covers at least half of the target causes half cover. It doesn't stack, so if doesn't matter how many characters or how many creatures are in between the attacker and the target, it's still half cover. But half cover gives the target, in this case your backliners, a +2 to their AC. So you're still helping by getting in the way, right? You're reducing the chance that this ranged attacker is going to hit your backline. All right. The next job you have is to do a decent amount of damage. Okay. And I think this is the easiest to understand. Most people seem to already, lean into this and have a good idea about this. I think most videos about how to make characters is about damage as well. So most people seem to get this one, but let's cover it just briefly. First off, weapons with bigger damage dice, that helps. More than you think. The average damage of one size larger damage dice is 1 damage before you factor in the chance to hit, but it adds up. And that's really the name of the game with 5th edition D&D. You have a lot of little things that add up. Okay, so next, more attacks per round. Whether you are getting the extra attack feature and just making more attacks, or you use the Nick weapon mastery to make 2 attacks with your action using dual wielding, or you weaponize your reaction or weaponize your bonus action, you want more attacks per round. That always helps. Then you're looking for effects that add damage to your attacks, and finally, effects that improve your chance to hit. I think people tend, at least in my experience, players tend to lean into the effects that add damage to your attack and often ignore the effects that improve your chance to hit. But chance to hit is a multiplier and not a positive one generally on your damage. So if you do 100 damage, if you have all these things adding up and you can do 100 damage in one attack, but you have a 10% chance to hit, then your net damage you're going to be dealing every round is 10, not 100, because you only have a 10% chance to hit, right? Like I said before, you can't get all of these features, right? That's not the expectation. I mean, maybe eventually by tier 3 of play, when you're level 12 or something, you can get all of these features. But it's hard to get all these features early on. And we're focusing on level 4, tier 1 right now. So let's boil this all the way down and say, what does this mean, right? What you're looking for is a damage per round, or DPR, of about 12 to 18. And I'm going to just use that range right now. I've done a bunch of builds at level 4, and the frontliners, relative to other things, kind of land in this area. You can go higher. You can get a higher damage per round. Those are kind of the outliers. And remember, we're going for good enough, not mechanically optimized for anything particular. Okay. And the second part of this is you need to maintain that DPR for the entire adventuring day. If you can do this burst of this much damage for 1 or 2 rounds, but then you don't have those resources that you use, like spell slots, and now you're out of spell slots, and for the rest of the day you can't maintain that level of DPR, then that's not really your DPR. You have to factor it all in, spread it all out across the whole adventuring day, and that's your actual DPR that you're going to contribute for the whole day. And your last job is to survive. All right, that means good defenses, good hit points. So let's talk about armor class first. You in tier 1, which is level 4, you should have an AC of at least 16. You have no business being in melee if you don't have an AC of 16. You should not stay there. And as you increase in higher tiers of play, add 1 more to your AC. So in tier 2, you'd want about a 17. In tier 3, you want at least an 18. And in tier 4, you want at least a 20, right? These are minimums, okay? I'm not saying that's a maximum, or even this is optimized. This is not optimized either. This is good enough, right? That's what we're going for. Okay, hit points. You want 36 hit points-ish in that ballpark, pretty close by level 4, and you want to be increasing by at least 8 hit points per level as you level up. If you don't have that much, you definitely want some sort of way to give yourself temporary hit points or other ways to compensate for having low hit points. Next, some kind of damage resistance is always helpful. Primarily in tier 1, you're looking at bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. Poison damage comes up, a fair bit. Necrotic. Those are probably the most common damage types you're going to face in tier 1. It's always great to have some way to give yourself temporary hit points. Some subclasses do that. Some classes have that. Some spells do that. Some species do that. So it's good. It's great to have the ability to give yourself temporary hit points. Self-healing is a good one, right? Paladins have lay on hands, and they can lay on hands on themselves as a bonus action. So they could be on the front line dealing damage, and if they start to get low, they can just bonus action heal themselves, right? Fighters can do the same thing with their second wind. Bonus action heal themselves. And at level 4, they actually can heal themselves more than the paladin can with lay on hands. So, all right. And finally, damage reduction. Some kind of damage reduction. There's not a lot of ways to get damage reduction. Like the heavy armor master feat can do that. There are a few ways, not a lot. Okay. But again, the expectation is not that you get all of these, certainly not at level 4, maybe not ever, that you would have all of these sources, all of these defense mechanisms for yourself. So you want some of them. All right, so let's boil this down into a number, and we're going to call that rounds to live, or RTL. And at level 4, you want an RTL, or rounds to live, of about 4 to 12. And that means if you get hit consistently, you're going to live 4 rounds, or 12 rounds, right? That's the range, 4 to 12, depending on how you build this frontliner, okay? And secondly, you need to maintain this level of rounds to live, or RTL, for the entire adventuring day, much like DPR. If you have, a spell slot or a 1 use per day effect that's going to really boost your survivability for 1 round or 1 combat, that's great, but it's not enough to count towards your RTL for the day, right? You need to be able to do that the whole day. And I asked my patrons what kind of things would they want to know or want me to talk about in this video about frontliners. And one of them came up with this question, which is a good one. How do I handle the frontliner role without attracting focus fire? Smart enemies target players who deal a lot of damage, especially if their AC isn't high. By default, a frontliner that deals a lot of damage will be targeted more. That's a great question. So it comes down to, really, the short answer is talk with the rest of the players, right? As you're planning your characters, before everybody's finished their builds, talk about this. If you're the only one who's going to play a frontliner and everybody else is like archers, casters, everybody on the back line, then the group has a problem. You're not going to be able to hold that front line by yourself. Even if you switch to tank, you would still have a hard time. And maybe you don't want to play tank, right? That is when you should talk with the rest of the group and say, hey, this isn't going to work. I don't really want to play this way. Some of us need to change. And maybe the group changes and you don't play a frontliner either, and you come up with a strategy where you're all just going to try to stay out of melee and some sort of teleporting, running around, maybe darkness spell to confuse enemies, or some sort of massive control effect to keep them away from you. That's great. Or maybe somebody else in the party says, oh yeah, well, I'm going to switch to frontliner. What I see usually in player groups is it's very rare that every single person is dead set on this class, this build. Usually, like half the party's like, guys, I'm up for anything. And if you guys just talk about it, it's easy to come to some sort of group consensus about how you're going to handle encounters, right? How many people are going to be frontliners, how many people are going to be backliners, and how you're all going to do this. Again, you don't have to do that composition. I can't emphasize that enough. It's just something that you do need to talk about. How are you going to handle this? So at least half the party should be a frontliner. Now, you should talk with the other frontliner then in this case and say, well, you figure out like how much damage are you doing? What's your build? Are you more offensive or defensive? And you guys need to start planning for that, right? Because the idea of frontliners is that you're not taunting the enemy to focus fire on you. Now, if you just do a lot more damage than the other frontliner, that may happen anyway. And you guys need to plan this. So how are you going to compensate for that? Right? Maybe you need, and maybe it's the healer, right? The healer's just saying, okay, great. You're going to do a lot of damage. I'm going to plan on healing you more. I'm going to cover you, right? Which is actually going to make the healer have more fun, right? The more they need to heal, the more their heals are needed, the more fun they're going to have. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But the idea here is with frontliners that there will be more than one of you, and you will be splitting the damage to at least some degree between you, right? You are not taking all the damage. So, and you're not even trying to take all the damage. So that's how you solve this particular problem, right? Which is actually the answer to many group party problems, which is simply talk to each other. All right, as you lean into these roles and doing your job so that others can do their jobs better, I promise you will have more fun. All of you are going to have more fun at the table. Everybody's going to feel more valued, and everybody will be working together. You'll have more teamwork, which will make combat more fun. And that is the point of this game. We're all here trying to have fun. So that's how you optimize for fun with frontliners. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have different thoughts or any thoughts you want to add to this, or maybe you disagree some things. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to discuss it with you. Thanks for watching.